Well, this is the weekend where we can all make ourselves look a little bit stupid, can't we? We are back today to focus on the first leg of the playoff semi-finals from the EFL Championship 23-24 season. We'll be taking a look in depth at Norwich City versus Leeds United and West Bromwich Albion versus Southampton, the first leg of the playoff ties which get underway this Sunday at lunchtime and early afternoon. It's 6v3rd, it's 5v4th, and on paper, there are a lot of things that could make this far easier than it's probably going to be to predict. The playoffs always throw up something, and I'm reluctant to make myself look silly. We'll talk about all of the reasons why third and fourth are still such heavy favourites at the moment. As always, we're going to preview both games in detail and give our score predictions for the first leg of the semi-finals. I'll encourage you to get involved in the comments, give me your score predictions for the first legs and see if you can beat or match my score. You get 3 for a perfect score, 1 for a correct outcome. If you beat or match my overall score across the 2 games, you'll get a shout out in Monday's recap when we look ahead to the second legs, which take place on Thursday and Friday. Before we go and look ahead to these two though, I've got to go and do a quick recap of match day 46, which was just a bonkers one in the championship, wasn't it? Birmingham City relegated after all 4 sides vying to avoid that final spot 1 on the final day. None of us saw that coming, no one predicted all 4. Ipswich of course wrapped up second place with a good win at home to Huddersfield, and Hull City missed out on the playoffs and then sacked Liam Rosenior despite achieving their first top half finish since being relegated from the Premier League in 2017. A bonkers one, we'll have a manager special on that soon. I only managed 3 points overall as I finished the season with my 2 weakest match days, but let's have a look at how everyone else got on in the comments, and in truth, it was one of the lowest scoring match days ever. The fact that nobody scored above 7 points tells you everything you need to know about match day 46. Let's start with the 2 that were level with me. Andy on 3 points, the same as me for 3 correct outcomes. Steve bailed out by 1 perfect score for Ipswich. On 4 points, we've got Oliveira, who picked up a perfect score, as well as Bobby, W&G, Simon and Adam. And on 5, 4 of you with 5 correct outcomes, Teo, Mello, Brian and Chris. On 6, we start to get to the perfect scores, which made all the difference this weekend. Daniel, Nigel and Ojo all with 1 perfect score. And on 7, a special shout out to Mitchell, who got 7 correct outcomes from that match day. Peter got 1 perfect score, and technically top of the table is Paul, 7 points for you, but 2 perfect scores, the only one to do so on match day 46. So not a good weekend, but we've got a chance at redemption in these playoff semi-finals. But boy, they want to trick us, don't they? Because it is Norwich City versus Leeds United, and it is West Brom versus Southampton. Now, 3rd and 4th, Leeds and Southampton finished 3 points apart. 5th and 6th place, West Brom and Norwich finished 2 points apart. But that gap in the middle was 12 points. There has been a clear runaway for all season. Leeds and Southampton, both sides that were relegated from the Premier League last year. West Brom and Norwich, both sides that had disappointing seasons in mid-table in the Championship. And even when you look at some of the other stats across the board, the number of goals scored during the season, the 3rd and 4th place sides, of course, have more. The best defence in the playoffs is Leeds United in 3rd place. The worst, the team they're up against, Norwich City, conceding over 20 goals more. Add to that Daniel Farke's going back to the club that he took up multiple times in his time at Norwich. And if you look at the home and away tables for these playoff campaigns, West Brom and Norwich would be 14th and 19th respectively if the table was purely based on their away form this season. Norwich's away form, barely a point per game, and they concede bucket loads too. All of the home records are in the top 6, so it makes these first legs crucially important, because if you were going by the form book over the season, you wouldn't be expecting Norwich City or West Bromwich Albion to be picking up much on the road in a second leg. But pressure and the playoffs do funny things, as does the end of the season. Leeds were in sparkling form, unbeaten for the calendar year, and then it all fell away towards the end of the year. 4 defeats in their last 6. Southampton, 3 defeats in a row before a redemption against Leeds on the final day. West Brom lost 3 of their last 4 and almost lost their playoff place in the meantime. And Norwich, despite a brilliant run to get up into the playoffs after Christmas, did lose their last game to make it 3 without a win. So after all of that fuss and all of that commotion and all of the favourites and the stats and everything else on paper, we have now got 4 teams coming into the playoffs that really, none of them are in great form. Norwich perhaps just about the best of the lot in terms of unbeaten runs, but they were pretty flat against Birmingham on Saturday. Maybe try to play the percentages. whilst Leeds and Southampton are licking their wounds after missing out on an automatic promotion push to a side that were in League One last year. So it does leave a lot of questions to be answered. We're going to start with the earlier kickoff, which is Norwich City versus Leeds United, 12 o'clock on Sunday. And boy, oh boy, this game looks pretty tough to call. It's not just the fact that Leeds have been losing recently. They've been struggling to score goals, which for this calendar year at least has not really been a problem for them. None in the 4-0 defeat against QPR where they were abysmal, and they've now conceded 9 in 3 games as well. But you look at their away record this season, and of the teams in the playoff, bar Southampton, they are the strongest one in there. They're certainly the strongest defence away from home in the playoffs this season. And it does give me a little bit of optimism that they might be able to strike a chord against Norwich, because I feel that Norwich are going to have to be aggressive at home in the first leg. They've only won one of their last 5 games and their goals have dried up a little bit as well. But Norwich at home this second half of the year have been fantastic. 43 goals overall at home this season and a very mean defensive record, as Leeds have had when we'll find out in a second leg. But Norwich have to get a result here. We mentioned their away record, which is the 6th worst in the Championship. You can't really see a chance for them if they go to the second leg behind or level. So you feel they have to get something out of this. You have to go for the win. And maybe that will suit Leeds playing on the counter. If we add to the stats that we were talking about for favourites and maybe not earlier in the episode, both Leeds and Southampton did the double over their opponents this year. So Leeds have got the experience of beating Norwich twice. Nobody knows them better than Daniel Farke in a championship. And while they did have a very disappointing end to the season, they have got so many dangerous players. And maybe that pressure is now lifted, actually. The promotion race was probably more intense than the playoff one, because that expectation of being second has now gone. And maybe there's a little bit less optimism and a little bit less expectation going into the playoffs, with Southampton in good form as well, and probably a bit more evenly matched than what was perceived to be the case with Ipswich. Despite that, there are goals in this Leeds team when they're at their best. They've got one of the best goal differences away from home in the Championship. They are a really good side on the counter. They didn't show it at QPR. They were poor at Coventry not long before that as well. And they had that crazy 4-3 win at Borough where the likes of Somerville and Nonto caused chaos all day against a high-pressing team, but they couldn't defend either under pressure. So I genuinely have no idea what to go for here. There's part of me that thinks it's going to be an absolute thriller. Norwich this second half of the year, since getting Josh Sargent back, have been much more of a threat. You add to that they've sort of stemmed the tide a little bit defensively at home as well. But the away leg, we know they're going to concede. We know Leeds are probably going to score. And as a result of that, Norwich have to be aggressive here. And I wonder if that's going to cause them problems. Both teams have got goal scorers in there. We know that Sarah and Sargent are both going to be a huge threat for Norwich. They've got experience in that defensive line in the likes of Shane Duffy, even up front with Ashley Barnes as well. It's a team that's got a lot of players that have won promotions or played in the Premier League. And I'm so torn on this game. I'm actually pretty confident with my prediction when it comes to the West Brom versus Southampton game. For this one, I've Menard a few times. I went for 3-2 Norwich. I went for 2-1. I went for 2-2. There's still part of me flicking between the two scorelines. Is that Leeds hangover going to push over against a side that have been very good at home this year? I genuinely feel like flipping a coin to decide between 2-1 Norwich and 2-2. Do you know what? I'm going to go for Norwich to get the win in the home leg, just because I feel they have to. Leeds at home against a Norwich side that are terrible on the road will be huge favourites in midweek. But can Norwich put a little bit of pressure on? For the sake of the neutral, and because I can't decide between the two, I'm going to say yes just about. I'm going to go for Norwich by 2-1. But this game, I'm pretty sure is going to have goals. And I think it could go anyway. I'm sure a few of you in the comments, I'm pretty sure across the comments actually, this game will be predicted with a lot of variety. I'm going for 2-1 to Norwich, and already I'm doubting my decision. Let's move on to the second game, which takes place straight after at 2:15. It is West Bromwich Albion versus Southampton. Again, as we mentioned, the Saints have done the double over West Brom this year, but both sides here finished the season in good style. Southampton went to Leeds and got that victory. We actually predicted, didn't we, in the last episode that they might go and rest a few there. But actually, after resting a few, they've gone back to full strength in that game and tried to get themselves settled and prepared, ready for the playoffs. And both Adams and Armstrong have scored bundles of goal this season. They linked up well for the first one. Will Smallbone had a good impact, and Flynn Downs got another hour in the tank, which is great news for them. It was just a good performance after 3 pretty turgid ones, in truth. West Brom were excellent against Preston with a 3-goal win. Good to have Brandon Thomas Asante in there as well. There's a lot of pressure on him and match up with other injuries. And West Brom, they've got a lot of quality midfielders to choose from, but maybe aren't the strongest at the back or up front. But that actually has led to a lot of the style that Corberan's produced this year, which is so reminiscent of his Huddersfield side a couple of years earlier that missed out on the Premier League due to some poor refereeing decisions in the final. And at home, it has really paid dividends. Like Leeds, they've got an incredible defensive record at their own ground. West Brom only conceding 17 home goals all season, scoring 38 and winning 15 of their 23 games in the meantime. Southampton on the road though, the strongest of the teams in the playoffs this year. 39 points with 11 wins and just 6 defeats. But despite that, a negative goal difference due to a couple of poor displays earlier in the season. Is another one that's hard to call, and we know exactly how this game's going to pan out, don't we? Southampton will not have less than 65 to 70% of the ball. West Brom will sit in a cautious shape, almost as if they were the away team. They will sit behind the ball, they will wait for mistakes, and they will pounce on the counter. I'm sure they'll go and press when Southampton play back to the keeper, try and set traps, but for Corberan, this is a case of must stay in the game. He'll probably fancy his chances, despite the record this season, of West Brom going and getting a draw at St Mary's, because Southampton have been frustrated by low blocks and teams that just sit back this year. You go and have a look at games like the Rotherham one, for example, where they were held to a 1-1 draw. Southampton have obviously come a long way since then, but even as recently as the Stoke game, you saw that they struggled to break a side down. West Brom have drawn a lot of their away games this year, so they'll want to get to the second leg ahead. And if they do, they'll fancy their chances of getting through here. They are wary as well that Southampton score bucket loads at home, so they've probably got to restrict them in the away leg. But are they going to be able to do so? That's the big question. It seems a weird one to predict this because West Brom very rarely draw at home. Southampton haven't drawn a huge amount on the road, and neither of the sides have drawn in the last 5 games. But I've just got a feeling that both sides would probably be fairly happy with it. I know West Brom would like a win, but I'm going to go for West Brom and Southampton to draw. We didn't get a Championship's favourite scoreline on match day 46, so I think we're going to get one in the first leg of the playoffs. Southampton score a goal for a moment of magic through one of their attacking stars, and West Brom to take advantage on the counter and get themselves a goal to stay in the tie. It is worth mentioning that West Brom have conceded 16 less goals than Southampton this year. Southampton had that spell back in, October odd time? It's late September under Russell Martin where they were conceding goals for fun. And obviously they let in 5 at Leicester the other week, but otherwise they have been a lot more solid the second half of the year. They are by far the highest scorers in the Championship playoffs, but most of those goals have come at home. So I think in this one, the entertainment might come in a second leg. For now, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. West Brom Southampton to be on a knife edge when they go to St Mary's later in the week. So let's have a quick recap then of what I've gone for in the first leg of these Championship playoff semi-finals. And despite all of the statistics, the big points gap between the top 2 and the bottom 2 in these playoffs, and the fact that I mentioned that Leeds and Southampton have done the double over their opponents this year, I've not predicted either to win in the first leg. I've gone for Norwich City to go hell for leather for a win against Leeds United and nick one by 2-1. I could easily see that being 2-2 though. I was literally a flip of a coin on that. And then West Brom versus Southampton. I think both sides would be relatively happy with a draw. And I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline to make up for the lack of one on match day 46. Those are just my predictions for the first leg of these Championship playoffs though. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below and give me your predictions for the first leg of the 23-24 playoff semi-finals. If you're going to either or both of the legs, have a good one. I hope you enjoy it. I hope all the sides perform to their best so we get great games as a neutral. If they do, we will inevitably see 3rd v 4th in the final, but the playoffs very rarely work out that way. A reminder, we'll be back on Monday for our second leg predictions and we'll know what's happened in the first by then. If you enjoyed this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Subscribe to stay up to date with a busy end to the season on the podcast channel. Next midweek, we'll be looking ahead to the final weekend of the Premier League season, the EFL playoff finals in League 1 and League 2, and of course the second leg of these semi-finals as well. I'm also at non-league finals day on Saturday, so you'll see the usual annual clips from them. But thank you very much for watching. You can find all the other playlists and stuff up in the eye above. A whole manager special not far around the corner by the looks of it. And I'll see you back here on Monday as we predict the second legs and see how stupid we look for predicting these scores.